Who were
So
they?
Veneti were actually three tribes.
A name whispered across ancient Europe. A people erased from memory, yet carved into history. Warriors, traders, nomads, or something far more complex, this is their story. In the dim recesses of ancient history, a name appears, mysterious, ambiguous, and shrouded in questions. The Venedi. Mentioned by Roman historians, Greek geographers, and Byzantine chroniclers, this enigmatic people were described as inhabiting the wild and untamed lands of Eastern Europe. But who were they? Were the Venedi the forebears of the Slavs, as some theories suggest, or an entirely different group, misidentified and misunderstood by the ancient world? Tonight, we delve into the labyrinth of historical records, linguistic puzzles, and archaeological evidence to uncover the truth behind the Venedi, a story that may reshape our understanding of Slavic origins. The name Venedi first appears in the writings of Roman historians like Tacitus. In his famous work, Germania, written around 98 AD, Tacitus describes the Venedi as inhabiting the eastern fringe of Germania, near the Vistula River. Tacitus writes, "I am uncertain whether to count the Venedi among the Germans or the Sarmatians. They have something of both. Wandering among the forests and mountains, they are more like Sarmatians, but their language and lifestyle resemble the Germans." This ambiguity has fueled centuries of debate. Were the Venedi a single, coherent tribe? Or were they a Roman construct, an attempt to categorize the unknown peoples of Eastern Europe into familiar boxes? Adding to the mystery, the Greek geographer Ptolemy places the Venedi farther north, along the shores of the Baltic Sea. His Geographia, written in the 2nd century AD, describes a vast region called Venede Bay, home to a people who controlled the trade routes along the Baltic coast. Two questions emerge. Were these references to the same people, scattered across a vast territory? And if so, why are their origins so difficult to trace? The answers lie buried in conflicting accounts, linguistic clues, and the shifting sands of history. Let's begin with what we know. Linguistics has often been called the archaeology of words, a tool that can reveal hidden connections between peoples and their histories. The name Venedi has long intrigued scholars because of its striking resemblance to the words used for Slavs in later historical periods. Consider the Germanic term Vens, used in medieval Europe to describe Slavic tribes living near the Baltic Sea. The word Wens is almost certainly derived from Venedi, a linguistic echo that suggests continuity. But is this resemblance proof that the Venedi were Slavs, or is it a coincidence born of overlapping territories and cultural interactions? The Byzantine historian Jordanes adds another layer of intrigue. Writing in the 6th century AD, Jordanes describes the vast territories east of the Vistula River as being inhabited by a people he calls the Veneti. He uses this name interchangeably with Sklaveni, Slavs, and Antes, suggesting a shared identity. Jordanes writes, "The Veneti are a populous nation who dwell in swamps and forests. They are known for their hardiness and their settlements stretch across vast distances." But Jordanes' account raises as many questions as it answers. Was he accurately describing the Slavs, or was he conflating different tribes under a single name? Some historians argue that the term Veneti was a generic label, much like the Roman use of Scythians or barbarians, applied to anyone living beyond the Roman Empire's borders. Linguistic evidence adds weight to the theory that the Venedi were connected to the Slavs. The Slavic word for water,
Voda,
shares a root with the name Venedi, suggesting a possible link to riverine or coastal communities. However, there's a counter-argument. Some scholars propose that the Venedi were not Slavs at all, but rather a pre-Slavic or non-Slavic Indo-European group, related to the Balts or even the early Celts. The overlap in territory and trade networks could explain the linguistic similarities without implying direct descent. This linguistic puzzle is further complicated by the sheer diversity of names used for the Venedi. In some accounts, they are linked to the Sarmatians, a nomadic people of Iranian origin. In others, they are described as forest dwellers, more akin to the early Slavs. The ambiguity of these accounts leaves us with a tantalizing possibility. The Venedi may have been a cultural or linguistic bridge between the Indo-European tribes of the West and the Slavs, who would later emerge as a distinct people. But if the Venedi were the precursors to the Slavs, why does the archaeological record remain so fragmented? Could it be that the Venedi were not a single tribe, but a confederation, a loose network of peoples connected by trade, language, and shared traditions? To answer this, we must dig deeper into the physical traces they left behind. To uncover the truth about the Venedi, we must look to the earth itself. While written records are sparse and ambiguous, archaeological evidence offers a more tangible glimpse into their lives, though even here, the trail is far from clear. The areas traditionally associated with the Venedi, stretching from the Vistula River basin to the Baltic Sea, have yielded artifacts that hint at a rich and complex culture. Pottery shards, burial mounds, and fortified settlements reveal a people who were skilled in agriculture, craftsmanship, and trade. One of the most intriguing finds comes from the so-called Lusatian culture, which thrived in Central and Eastern Europe during the Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age. This culture, with its distinctive pottery and cremation burials, is often linked to Proto-Slavic peoples. Could the Lusatians have been the ancestors of the Venedi, or even the Venedi themselves? Yet, the connection is not straightforward. The Lusatian culture's geographic range overlaps with that of Germanic and Celtic tribes, raising questions about whether it represented a single ethnic group or a multicultural melting pot. Burial practices offer another clue. Archaeologists have discovered burial mounds in the Vistula basin that show striking similarities to later Slavic customs. These include the placement of tools, weapons, and food in graves, suggesting a belief in an afterlife and a connection to ancestral spirits. However, these mounds also contain artifacts that are distinctly Sarmatian or Baltic in style. This has led some scholars to argue that the Venedi were not a cohesive ethnic group, but rather a confederation of tribes, each with its own unique cultural traits. Adding to the mystery are the so-called amber routes, ancient trade networks that passed through Venedi territory, connecting the Baltic Sea to the Roman Empire. The Venedi's control of these routes would have made them wealthy and influential, but it also exposed them to cultural influences from both East and West. Could this explain the blend of artifacts found in their territory? Fortified settlements or hill forts provide further evidence of the Venedi's way of life. These wooden and earthen structures were often built on high ground, overlooking rivers or trade routes. They serve not only as defensive strongholds, but also as centers of trade and governance. One notable site is Biskupin in modern-day Poland, a well-preserved settlement that dates back to the Lusatian culture. While it predates the historical mentions of the Venedi, its layout and construction suggest a continuity of settlement patterns that may have influenced later Slavic communities. Artifacts like jewelry and tools also tell a story. Many items found in Venedi-associated regions feature motifs of animals and nature, symbols that later appear in Slavic folklore and mythology. These designs hint at a spiritual connection to the natural world, a theme that would become central to Slavic culture. But the question remains, were these artifacts uniquely Venedi, or were they borrowed from neighboring cultures? The lack of definitive evidence leaves us with more questions than answers, but it also opens the door to intriguing possibilities. The archaeological record paints a picture of a people who were adaptable, resourceful, and deeply connected to their environment. But it also reveals a complexity that defies easy categorization. To understand who the Venedi truly were, we must now turn to their disappearance and the rise of the Slavs who followed in their footsteps. By the 6th century AD, the Venedi seemed to vanish from the historical record, replaced by a new and distinct group, the Slavs. But what happened to them? Did the Venedi evolve into the Slavs, or were they absorbed and assimilated by their more numerous neighbors? One compelling theory suggests that the Venedi were indeed the Proto-Slavs, a population that gradually developed into the Sclaveni and Antes described in Byzantine sources. This theory is supported by linguistic and cultural continuities, as well as the geographic overlap between Venedi and early Slavic settlements. However, not everyone agrees. Some historians argue that the Venedi were a separate group altogether, possibly Balts, Sarmatians, or even Celts, who were displaced or absorbed during the mass migrations of the 4th to 6th centuries AD. The chaos of this period, marked by the fall of the Roman Empire and the incursions of the Huns, created a power vacuum that allowed new groups to emerge and old ones to disappear. The migration era was a time of immense upheaval, with tribes constantly moving, merging, and redefining themselves. The Venedi, positioned at the crossroads of Europe, would have been especially vulnerable to these forces. Some scholars propose that the Venedi were absorbed by the early Slavs, contributing to their genetic and cultural makeup. This would explain why the name Venedi was eventually replaced by Slavs in historical accounts, as the emerging Slavic identity subsumed the older regional designations. The spread of Christianity in Eastern Europe also played a role in the disappearance of the Venedi. As Slavic tribes adopted Christianity, their pagan traditions were either suppressed or transformed into Christian rituals. The name Venedi, associated with an earlier, non-Christian past, may have been deliberately erased by the new religious order. This process of cultural assimilation and religious transformation created a unified Slavic identity that obscured older tribal distinctions. By the 9th century, the term Venedi had largely disappeared, replaced by the more cohesive notion of a Slavic people. Byzantine chroniclers like Procopius and Jordanes played a significant role in defining the early Slavs. Their accounts describe the Sclaveni and Antes as distinct groups, yet they also suggest a connection to the earlier Venedi. This continuity raises the possibility that the Venedi were not so much a vanished people as they were an evolving identity, a stepping stone on the path to the Slavs we recognize today. But what if the Venedi were something more? Could they have been a cultural bridge, connecting the ancient Indo-European world to the Slavic civilizations that would later rise to prominence? Or are we simply projecting modern ideas onto a name that meant something entirely different to the ancients? As we unravel the final threads of this mystery, we must confront the possibility that the Venedi's true legacy lies not in their disappearance, but in the myths and legends they left behind. From the echoes of their name in medieval texts to the cultural patterns they left behind, the Venedi continue to intrigue and inspire those who seek to understand Europe's ancient past. Perhaps the most enduring testament to the Venedi is their name. The word survives in multiple forms across Europe, from the medieval term Wends, used by Germanic tribes to describe their Slavic neighbors, to regional names like Veneto in Italy. Their name, though fragmented across time and space, serves as a thread that links the past to the present. Some elements of Slavic mythology may have their roots in the Venedi. The reverence for rivers, forests, and ancestral spirits, so central to early Slavic beliefs, aligns with the descriptions of the Venedi as a people tied to nature and the land. Even the enduring myths of the Slavs, like the battle between Perun, the thunder god, and Veles, the god of chaos, could be reinterpretations of older Venedi traditions. Were these myths shaped by the Venedi, or were they inherited from even earlier Indo-European cultures, passed down through generations? The answer remains elusive, but the parallels are impossible to ignore. Perhaps the Venedi's greatest legacy is their role as a cultural bridge. Positioned at the crossroads of Europe, the Venedi facilitated the exchange of ideas, goods, and traditions between diverse civilizations. Through their connections to Baltic, Sarmatian, and even Roman cultures, the Venedi helped lay the groundwork for the rich tapestry of Slavic identity. Their ability to adapt and thrive in a dynamic world ensured that their influence would persist long after their name faded from history. The story of the Venedi is a reminder of how fragile and fluid history can be. Were they the ancestors of the Slavs, a forgotten tribe, or simply a name used by outsiders to describe an unknown people? In truth, the Venedi are all of these things. They are a people of shadows and echoes, waiting to be rediscovered by those willing to search. The question is not where they went, but what we can learn from the fragments they left behind.